In 2021, we have major problems in the media, especially sports media across the world. Revisionist history, trying to say things like, oh, Daniel Bryan is the greatest pro wrestler of all time. Don't even get me started on that. The use of the term GOAT, where we were growing up, the term GOAT literally meant the worst player on the team. Greatest of all time is being assessed in the hands of media members who are under the age of 40. There's no veteran media around to cover sports besides me and a few other people. Now, in my 38 years of covering hockey, I know of one team that could compare to the worst sports franchises of all time. Now, the problem with the Buffalo Sabres this year, playing in the American Division, not playing the weaker teams from the Canada or the other divisions, really hurting them. They're saying they're the worst NHL team ever, whatever. No, the worst NHL team, for me, consistently, is the 1981 Winnipeg Jets. Now, I know Washington, their first season was rough. I know the first season of the reformed Ottawa Senators was rough. But this team had won the AFCO Cup in the WHA in 79. They defeated Gretzky's Oilers, all the good players on that team. But within 2 years, Winnipeg had pretty well fallen apart, despite the fact they had some good players on the roster. Now, the 81 season was Winnipeg's second year in the NHL. Now, they finished fifth and last in the Smythe Division. They were minus 154, scoring only 246 goals and conceding 400. Now, they finished with a record of 9-57-14. But let's put this in perspective. On the road, I think all year they only won one game, and you pretty well knew who they won it against. Anyway, I'll tell you in a second. But they struggled with multiple goaltenders. A lot of veterans didn't work. Young players that were, coming up. But again, they went from world champions for the WHA, and that's what it was. It was a world title, to as bad as any team can be. They struggled at home. They couldn't be consistent on the road. They gave up more than 6 goals a game. I think it's 25 times. And several games were 10 goals or more. Now that year, Tom McVie led the season as head coach, 120-7. Bill Sutherland took over with a little bit better record, 620-3, while Mike Smith finished up with 217-4. Now, this was a season where they went 30 games without a victory from the start of the season to about close to the halfway mark. Now, in the off season, they named Morris Lukowich team captain, and former captain who quarterbacked the defense, Lars-Erik Schoberg, announced retirement at the end of the 80 campaign. Now, Lukowich had been with the Jets since their final season in WHA, helping to win the AFCO Cup. Unfortunately, Winnipeg draft picks weren't fully ready. Now, Dave Babbage was taken second overall in the 80 NHL draft, a very competent player. He was a high-scoring defenseman with the Portland Winterhawks. They also took Mo Manta from the Marlies, and he took Brian Mullen from the U.S. national team in the 7th round. Now, they did make a few trades in the offseason, but they brought in a couple of players that did nothing for them, including Rick Bowness, the longtime NHL coach, and Normand Dupont, who was a failed draft pick for the Montreal Canadiens. He was selected in the first round in the 77th draft. He only had a goal and 4 points in the 35 games with Montreal in 1980 before coming over, and him and Danny Jeffriot and the bad defensive players that he had on the forward lines really hurt. Now, 30 games without a loss. Let's put some perspective. They started not too bad. They were 1-2-1 in their first 4 games and knocked off actually the Chicago Blackhawks 62 in a big home win. Now from there it was all downhill. From October 22nd to almost Christmas, terrible results. They couldn't do anything on the road. They were only tying at home. Now, they lost to Buffalo. Let's put this back. Lost to Buffalo. Lost to Minnesota. Tied Boston 7-7 at home. I watched that game. That was quite an interesting contest. Lost Chicago and Pittsburgh, tied Washington, Calgary, then lost to Edmonton, Toronto, and Quebec. Tied with Boston 5-5, another scoring debacle. Then he lost to Montreal, Vancouver, LA, Buffalo, and the Flyers. Tied the Islanders 4-4. Lost 8-4 to the Whalers. Tied St. Louis. And then the shit really hit the fan, ladies and gentlemen. Lost to Calgary, New York, Calgary again, St. Louis, Hartford, Minnesota, the New York Islanders in a back-to-back, the New York Rangers, and the St. Louis Blues. Now, the 30-game streak came to an end against Colorado Rockies, a big 5-4 victory. From then on, they won lost 3 more games. So they only won 1 of 34 games, ladies and gentlemen. Defeated Minnesota, Detroit, and Washington, and they had a little uptick with beating the Flyers January 2nd and beating Toronto in Toronto 8-2, ladies and gentlemen. That's the game everybody still talks about. That was a long game for the Leafs to do that. Now, things didn't look up for the rest of the season. They did beat the Rangers at home on January 21st, and then they bet Toronto again on the road and shut them out, ladies and gentlemen, for their second win against the Leafs that year. But the biggest boondoggle of the year came on March 7th when Montreal was in the midst of their own losing streak, where they had lost 9-3 to Montreal 3 days before and bet the Habs 4-2 at home to win their 8th game of the season. Now, the last victory of the year came March 18th, a second victory against Colorado to make them a grand total of 9, 57, and 14 for the season. Now, you got to remember, ladies and gentlemen, the Edmonton Oilers weren't the Edmonton Oilers of a couple of seasons later. Actually, Edmonton that year finished 4th place in the division. In that year, St. Louis was the Smythe Division stalwarts, with Chicago and Vancouver close behind. Now, Dave Christian led the team in scoring that year with 71 points with a minus 54. Not the worst plus-minus on the team. Who's the worst plus-minus, ladies and gentlemen? Take a quick guess. I mentioned them both earlier. Norm Dupont was minus 57 despite scoring 27 goals. And 8 power play goals besides, so do the math. Dave Babich, minus 61 despite 44 solid points and 3 power play goals. Now, there was some positives on the team. Willie Lindstrom, very consistent, scored 22 goals that year. The great, like I said, Tim Tripper had 29 points in 56 games. Peter Sullivan, still very consistent on the defensive side. And Andrew Steen was there, even though his talent wasn't as strong as before. And, Peter Marsh had not too bad. But they had some older players that were given a last chance, including Richard Mulhern and Tom Bladen. It was extremely rough. And it was, of course, Jules Drouin's kind of last cup of coffee as well. Now, the goaltending that year, we did a previous podcast on Pierre Hamel and Marcus Mattson. Hamel only lost 20 games compared to Mattson's 21. Both had averages in a 4.5 to 4.7 range. Michel Dion, a former Nordique, 3-6-3 with a 4.83 average. And Lindsay Middlebrook went 0-9, ladies and gentlemen, a rough year for Lindsay. 5.97 average. And the one-game wonder of Ron Lustel, he has the stigma of having allowed more goals than any other goaltender who only appeared in one NHL game. He gave up 10 goals on 51 shots in the 10-2 loss to the Canucks for his only career game. Now, despite this, he was a good WHL and BCJHL prospect. Actually was taken the 6th round overall by the Jets in 1980. Now, he had a very consistent career in after his draft, actually in the WHL. He went back to the Saskatoon Blades in 1982 with a 27-11-1 record, and one of the top goalies. And he wrapped up his junior career with the Brandon Wheat Kings of the WHL. So he played 5 junior seasons, very consistent. Now, talking about that game, John Ferguson Sr., the former AB stalwart, was facing severe goaltending woes. He called up Lustel from the Saskatoon Blades, again, their draft pick, hoping he would be the solution. Again, the 41 saves against Vancouver were a Herculean effort, because at the time Vancouver had a lot of snipers which really took apart the opponents. So a lot of stories about that squad. I don't know exactly why they were so terrible. It was just a combination of factors. I like to say in the movie business, it was a perfect storm. You had old players that weren't producing, old players over the hill, young players weren't there yet. But when Howardchuk showed up, everything lifted, ladies and gentlemen. So Dave Howardchuk saved the franchise. And there was some talk after that season in 81 that Winnipeg might be shifted or folded. And thank God for Howardchuk showing up. So if you're Winnipeg Jets fans, you know how the franchise went away and came back. You've been through a lot of drama. The perfection of the WHA years, where technically you were the WHA had 3 MVPs for teams: Winnipeg, Houston, and Quebec, and the Jets were the marquee team in that major pro league. To see them fall as much as he did, Bobby Hull said it in published reports in 81. He said, this is just cruel. And nobody really wants to think of Winnipeg Jets as a losing franchise. If anything, they're one of Canada's teams, literally and figuratively. The Jets have done so much for hockey, the franchise, but it was just bad timing, that's all. Say like Blue Radio. So if you like what we're doing here with the Ventures Podcast, give us a like, comment, or subscribe. And requests are also always considered. And thanks for listening. If you're Jets fans, just forget 81. It was like a blip on the radar. Sort of like Montreal when he almost folded when Gilmore was there. And that's a true story. Have a good day. Bye.